Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and you guys know what time it is. Time to talk about current events in the online fitness community. And normally in this segment, I like to do a little banter, a little trolling, all that stuff. I want to just throw that to the side today because this topic is so detailed and so nuanced that I want to just get into it. We don't want any trolling. So I'm going to throw on my +5 hat of speechcraft. And I'm going to answer the question as Greg over at Kinobody had put forward, because he actually asked in the video. He kind of wanted my response to it. And I really, really like these sort of hypothetical discussions. And the thing is, it's not just hypothetical. This is talking about applying this stuff to a real human being, particularly real human beings who have different appetites. And that's something that we have to understand is the psychology and hormones involved with different people's appetites. And we have people at different extremes here. And I don't know that in a single video like this I can even begin to address all the nuances of the topics that Greg raised. But he raised some interesting points. And he had said, he kind of challenged me to say what would happen if I personally did, cut down to a certain amount of volume, less activity, and what would happen. Well, that's a good point, because let's go over to my DEXA scan results last year. Right? Because I'm not a really lean guy, but the point still holds true. Activity versus recovery versus calories in versus out. This applies to all of us, particularly those of us who are more advanced lifters, right? More advanced lifters. What am I going to mean by advanced lifters? I don't know, guys. If you can bench 300 and you can squat 400, you're pretty well an advanced lifter, realistically speaking. So we're no longer dealing with noobs, right, who are still trying to build up to a 200 bench press for reps. So when you're a bit more of an advanced lifter, these things start to become a balancing act. And what happened on my own DEXA scan? I lost muscle on one of them, and then the next one, I lost 15 pounds of body fat over the course of 90 days on a DEXA scan with zero net lean tissue loss. I actually did less activity. Like honestly, so if we kind of come over to the point that he made, and I ended up still being, by most people's standards, not particularly lean. It came back at 17.0%. But that was a 17% body fat with 15 pounds of fat loss with zero lean tissue loss. As an advanced lifter, what did my training look like? I had cut back at that point to no cardio. No real cardio other than, at the time walking my dog. I was lifting 3 days a week, 5 to 8 reps, just big movements. That's actually what I cut down to. It was basically just like squats, bench press, deadlift, chin-ups, overhead pressing, weighted dips, some front squats, big movements. Medium volume, 5 to 8 rep range, and I was training 3 days a week, and I was just kind of chilling and resting the other 4. I kept my protein really, really high, and just kind of tracked my calories. And that ended up, for that phase, being 15 pounds of fat loss with no lean tissue loss as an advanced lifter. So he has a point there. And I think what we need to think about in terms of body composition, when it comes to appetite control, and I think, again, let's take someone like me. I have a much, much larger appetite than most people. That's why it's easy for me to gain body fat. I don't have a slow metabolism. Like even right now, my maintenance calories are 35 to 3,600 calories a day doing no cardio. That's my maintenance calories. I don't have a slow metabolism. I got a crazy appetite. So let's come over and let's look at the situation and realize that most people who maybe carry extra body fat easier, we have the similar appetite issues to, say, someone like Greg, who stays at a much lower body fat, right? So when you start getting lean, like when you guys start hitting that 10% lower body fat, your brain will play havoc on you. And he pointed that out. That's part of our survival mechanisms as a species. And I'm going to agree with that. He's right. That when you start to get to those body fat levels, your appetite can play games with you. Like it can start to become a survival situation. We are hardwired to not let ourselves get that lean. Now, what ends up happening, and I think what we see happening, is that usually with the obesity epidemic, we have outside triggers, whether it's epidemiology, hyperpalatable foods. We could argue about xenochemicals in the environment and all these other things that are causing those same survival instincts to kick in when we're not lean. Okay. And again, there can be epidemiology related to childhood trauma could affect those things. And that's a whole interesting realm of science right now, too, because it can trigger some of those same hormonal reactions. And so emotions can trigger those same hormonal reactions in the brain that cause you to overeat when you're 7% body fat, when you're at 20%. So it's an interesting point. Is he right about the activity versus appetite? Yeah, to some extent he is true, because you guys got to remember, most of the people who are doing the tons of activity and are really lean, they're usually on hefty amounts of gear, aren't they? Because here's what we need to understand, and I'm going to actually say something that even Alex Viada, of all people, and you guys need to understand, Alex Viada wrote the book The Hybrid Athlete. He works with hybrid athletes. He himself does 2 different endurance sports and is a power lifter. And he deadlifts 700 pounds. But he also does super marathons and is a triathlete. Okay? He coaches hybrid athletes. And even though he's really big on these ultra high energy turnovers, I've actually heard him say, you guys got to keep in mind, he has a background in human biomechanics. That's what his graduate work was in. He's even said, look, if your goal is body composition, every beat of physical activity you do needs to stimulate muscle growth, like resistance training or things that are going to cause a direct hypertrophic response is where all your activity needs to be. Like if that's really what's the most important goal to you. I've heard him basically say that. Or you take someone like my bro Nikola Ila, who is also a coach, good personal friend of mine. He's actually based out of Canada. He runs a coaching service. He doesn't do cardio. He is one of the biggest, most jacked naturals that I know. And people would say, well, what do you mean? Well, he's bigger than Greg. I'll put it that way. All right, he's bigger than Greg. Nico squats 550 raw. I don't think he goes over about 10, 11% body fat. Ever. And I've seen him obviously pretty peeled. But he stays lean with a 6-pack year round. He doesn't do cardio. It's all resistance training. It's all tracking his calories. It's all higher protein intakes, and he tracks everything he eats. But even he eats a little bit of, some junk in there. Like he actually eats pretty good food because he's Italian, and I've seen him do all those pasta dishes and stuff. So the point we get to with a lot of that is that there is an element of truth to that. And it comes down to balancing all of these factors. It comes down to balancing your appetite with your activity. And yes, a lot of conditioning work can boost appetite. It absolutely can boost appetite. And in my case, I found it easier to drop the body fat during that last run when I wasn't doing any cardio at all. And here's what it comes down to. I have to run into this same situation that he's talking about now. I'm on a recomp. I've been staying at maintenance this entire year. I'm trying to do a very, very slow recomp while maximizing my performance. So for me, I actually have to do this. I have to weigh this stuff out. Because I do a fairly high volume training because I'm running the conjugate method right now. I have to actually balance out with all of my training the fact that I am not in a calorie surplus. All right, that affects the amount of training volume that you can recover from. Right, that affects what you can recover from. So for me, it is a balancing act. If I need to make sure that every single piece of physical activity that I do either enhances the recovery from my training or has a direct training response to one of my 3 big performance elements. It better address max strength, speed strength. It better address general hypertrophy, weak point hypertrophy. And we notice what's all of my training volume geared around. My volume work is geared around all of my weak points from a muscular potential perspective as they relate to my big lifts. All right? What do you guys see me doing? More quad work, upper chest, triceps. Yeah, especially triceps. I need bigger arms. That's where you're seeing any of my volume work. Everything that's anything that's beyond my basic squat, bench, deadlift variations, which are in the 1 to 5 rep range, all of it. It's all geared towards weak points, any volume. So we have to look at it from that perspective of, is everything that you are doing in terms of physical activity directly relating to your exact progress? Or are you just doing junk volume? And is it junk cardio and junk conditioning? And I'm not saying conditioning isn't even important for strength and muscle, because it is. Being in shape at least in terms of that level of fitness. I don't mean in shape in terms of just body fat, can absolutely affect your muscle growth, your muscle recovery, because it affects your ability to recover from training. It can affect your work density, your ability to get a large amount of workload done per unit of time, right? Conditioning matters even for power lifters who really want to be good. It matters. But it's the question of balancing how much conditioning are you doing, how's it affecting your recovery, and let's come back over to the body composition thing. What happens when you guys get leaner? The leaner you get, you kind of lose a little bit of that cushioning in terms of recovery. And as he pointed out, I'll agree with that point. So if guys are going to get really lean and stay fairly lean and they want to do a fair amount of training volume, number one, they've got to pay very close attention to things like fatigue versus stimulus ratios of their actual training, even their exercise selection. There comes down to a point where you're looking at going, man, should I do a deadlift or should I go to a deficit deadlift because I can get a similar amount of training stimulus with a little bit less fatigue that I have to recover from? You can reach a threshold of where this stuff starts to matter, particularly when you are not in a calorie surplus or if you're not willing to up the dose on your drugs, because that's the general response. That's the usual response a lot of athletes and lifters and everyone does. Well, if the recovery becomes an issue on that, I can just up my dose, bro. Well, what if upping your dose isn't an option? What if you don't want to use any gear or you don't want to use more than you're on? Well, that's going to be a problem. You're going to have to deal with the fatigue management side of your training. Well, how much room does that leave for other activity? And that's kind of the point, the take home. Let's come over to that. Let's assume body composition is your primary goal. Not my bag. Assuming body composition is your primary goal, but you have devised a manageable strategy for maintaining your appetite. Like you've got your appetite under control. You got yourself in a life situation where you can eat 24 or 2,500 calories and actually be okay because you've got your food intake sorted, your protein. You've got everything sorted into such a way that you can manage that through these different strategies. And I'm not saying intermittent fasting is the way to do that. That is one of the tools that people use. That's one tool in the toolbox. If you're in a situation to where you can manage your calories, I would come back over and say, well, yeah, at that point, if body composition is all you care about, or it's your primary goal and everything else is secondary, every bit of physical activity that you do, and I'm talking every piece of physical activity that you do, should probably be geared towards gaining muscle and strength or enhancing your recovery from your workouts. Because, I mean, active recovery, there are things that we do that's active recovery, rejuvenation training. That's the direction you should probably go. It's the direction you should probably go, because otherwise you're beating yourself up for no return on it. Now, when food goes higher, you can do more with it. But we come back over to that point of you guys who are going to get even leaner. If you're going to get really lean and you're not going to be in a calorie surplus at any time for an extended period of time in the near future, yeah, fatigue management of your training becomes important. You actually need to prioritize everything that you do that's physical. So to a degree, I'm going to say that he is right. He's right there in regards to that, particularly, especially people with busy lives of any type. Might be something to be said for that. Because if you're spending less of your time doing extra activity that's not related to your direct goals, not helping you, and then you're eating less on top of it, you're freeing up more time for other bits of productivity, right? You're having to maximize these effects for your lifestyle for someone who is not doing it as an athlete. When you're an athlete, you can worry about what's optimal. When you have a busy life, you need to worry about what's efficient, and sometimes that efficiency is a matter of managing fatigue resources. Yeah, I think that's the best way to put it. So I'm not necessarily agreeing with everything that he said there, but I'm going to say that there is a large degree of truth there, and that's based upon observation, that's based upon understanding the science, and then looking at things like individual appetite triggers, fatigue. There's a degree of truth to what he's saying here, based upon his own experiences. All right, guys, well, that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.